The Ramchal wrote a sefer called Maimer HaGeula. This is the Maimer HaGeula. I don't believe it's in English, and if it was in English, you wouldn't understand it in English. It's hard enough to understand in Hebrew. It's a Kabbalah sefer. And he discusses how the Geula is going to come about. And in there, one of his core subjects is Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. The Vilna Gaon, who lived after the Ramchal, also writes about Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. Where does this concept of Mashiach ben Yosef come from? Well, we have, first of all, what we saw today in Yeshaya about Melech HaMashiach, apparently David, or perhaps Yosef, killing this Rosh Amilus, and Rashi says Mashiach ben Yosef. We have a Gemara that says that there'll be a funeral for Mashiach ben Yosef, and hopefully there won't. Either way, there is a person called Mashiach ben Yosef in addition to the person called Mashiach ben David. The Mashiach ben Yosef is a scion of the house of Ephraim. The Mashiach ben David is a scion of the house of Yehuda. And as we said earlier, the house of Rachel and the house of Leah, we know the conflict that occurred in the lives of Rachel and Leah between them. Yaakov may have loved Rachel more than Leah. Rachel didn't have children, Leah had children. The story with the flowers, the Dudaim, where Rachel asked for the Dudaim. All those incidences between Rachel and Leah was because they were building different houses for Bnei Yisrael. And Leah brought to the world Yehuda and the Malchus Beis David. And Rachel brought to the world Yosef and of course Binyamin, but Yosef, Ephraim, Menashe has his place as well, but Ephraim is the Melech Yisrael, Yerovam ben Avad. And these two houses have to come together. The tension that occurred between Rachel and Leah, and then the tension that occurred between their children, Yosef, the son of Leah, and the other sons of Yosef, the son of Rachel, and the other sons, the 10 sons of Leah, to whatever extent they may have been involved in selling Yosef, more or less, that tension, the tension Rachel-Leah, the tension between Yosef and his brothers, the tension that occurs later between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, that has to come to an end. And as we saw today in Yeshaya, the Melech HaMashiach ben David, the Melech HaMashiach ben Yosef will come together to perfect the world and to perfect the Klal Yisrael and make they have to come together, and that's a messianic perspective. What is the Mashiach ben Yosef and what is the Mashiach ben David? It becomes clear when you learn the Maimer HaGeula of the Ramchal and also from the Gra, Vilna Gaon, that they have two different tafkidim, they have two different jobs. Mashiach ben Yosef is, so to speak, a warrior. He's going to take care of the physical needs of the Jewish people. He's going to free them from the physical slavery. He's going to do the things that a king would do when he's dealing with the physical needs of his people. And then there's Mashiach ben David, who after the physical needs of the people are taken care of, he comes and lifts up the people and teaches them to be on a higher level spiritually. Just as a human being, the Ramchal says, as explained by Rav Kook, just as a human being has a guf and a neshama, the guf needs the neshama. If the guf doesn't have a neshama, it's back to dust of the earth. If the neshama doesn't have a guf, it just remains upstairs in heaven. And as we learned in the Ramchal, the neshama wants to come down to earth because it wants to earn its keep. If it's just up there basking in the glory of God, it's doing it because it's just there. It didn't do anything to earn that kind of reward. And the neshama wants to earn that reward. So it wants to come down into a guf, learn Torah, do mitzvah, so then after 120 years, the neshama can go back up and bask, go to Gan Eden or go to Olam Haba and enjoy the reward because it earned it while it was in the guf. The guf needs the neshama needs the guf. And what is true for an individual is true for community, and it's true for the world, and it's true for the universe. It's made of guf and neshama. There's a physical aspect, there's a spiritual aspect. And for the Jewish people, the physical aspect needs to be perfected. It needs to be rectified through Mashiach ben Yosef. And when that's done and ready, Mashiach ben David can come and then lift us up spiritually. The guf is perfected by Mashiach ben Yosef. The physical aspects of the Jewish people, the spiritual aspects of the Jewish people are perfected by Mashiach ben David. Now we go a bit to the Ramchal and the Baomer HaGeula. The Ramchal tells us that Mashiach ben Yosef has this warrior characteristic. And like Mashiach ben David, in every generation, there's someone who is roy to reveal himself. The question is the generation ready for it? Have we lifted ourselves up enough? We don't have to be perfect, because Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef will finish off the perfection for us, with us. But we have to get to a certain level that they're ready to come. And in every generation, there's someone that has this neshama of Mashiach ben David and this neshama of Mashiach ben Yosef. And there was a generation, the Ramchal says, where you can actually pinpoint who Mashiach ben Yosef was, or he was a spark of Mashiach ben Yosef. And that was Rabi Akiva. Rabi Akiva, the Rebbe of Rav Shimon bar Yochai, was a Mashiach ben Yosef. And in fact, we call Rabi Akiva Akiva ben Yosef. Rabbi Akiva was a convert. We call him Akiva ben Yosef. And he had the potential to be the Mashiach ben Yosef. And he went out and worked on this potential. And as a warrior, we think of Rabbi Akiva only as the great Tana, the Oker Horeh V'Toichnam Zuba Zuba Sora, the great Rabbi Akiva. Whenever Rabbi Akiva says something, the halacha is like him, except if he's arguing with a majority. But other than that, Rabbi Akiva is Rabbi Akiva. The Rabbi Akiva whose skin was being raked and said, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The Rabi Akiva led a revolt against the Romans. And he felt that Bar Kokhba was Mashiach. Under this analysis, Rabbi Akiva would have been Mashiach ben Yosef and Bar Kokhba would have been Mashiach ben David. Under this analysis. There are different ways to look at it. The point I want to make here right now is that the Ramchal clearly writes that Rabbi Akiva had a spark in his neshama of Mashiach ben Yosef. And he went out, and understanding who he went out and did something with that spark. And that was to try to reestablish the Jewish kingdom after the Romans had taken over. And about 50 years after the Churban, he set out to form an army around Bar Kokhba and take over Eretz Yisrael again. And for 2 or 3 years, there was a Jewish kingdom here under Bar Kokhba in Judea. And then it failed. Bar Kokhba was killed, he died. And that's where we started. Did Rabbi Akiva make a mistake? So there are certain people that write, yes, he made a mistake. Bar Kokhba was not Mashiach. And many Jews died in the battle. Rabbi Akiva made a mistake. Again, I find that difficult to say that Rabbi Akiva made a mistake. Rabbi Akiva is the person all over Mishnayos. When Rabbi Akiva says something, that's it. Topic closed. It's halachas like him. For one to say that Rabbi Akiva made this immense mistake, we're not talking about is it kosher, is it not kosher? Rabbi Akiva said it is and it wasn't. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a mistake of magnificent proportion. We're talking about a mistake of historical proportion. We're not talking about some person needed to eat a chicken. Rabbi Akiva said, yeah, no, and he made a mistake. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a mistake of historical proportion. Rabbi Akiva is saying that we're going to fight the Romans. We're going to take back Eretz Yisrael. And Bar Kokhba is Mashiach. And let's go and do this. It was not a mistake. It was part of a process of bringing about the ultimate Geula. We know that we have a lot of false messiahs in our history. And people put Bar Kokhba in the category of a false messiah, and there's, as I said, there's sources for that. But if you're going to have those sources, you must come to the conclusion that Rabbi Akiva made some kind of mistake. And there seems to be a Lashon Rambam that people use to say Rabbi Akiva made a mistake. I find that difficult to accept, and Ramchal basically didn't accept that. Rabbi Akiva was right. He just didn't complete the mission because he wasn't destined to to complete the mission. He was destined to start a process where Jewish people would not sink under the Goyim and accept everything that they do to us as the Romans did. They would not accept that. The Jews would stand up and fight. In other words, according to the Ramchal, Rabbi Akiva rejected the idea of passivity. You don't just wait around for a man on a white donkey to come around and say, get your tickets. You don't sit around passively and wait. Rabbi Akiva got up and said, we're going to make an army here. This is intolerable what the Romans are doing to us. It's intolerable. We're going to make an army and we're going to begin the process of fighting the Goyim back. Whether we can complete the process today or not is immaterial. But we're going to begin a process and we're going to begin a hashkafa. We're going to begin a perspective that I'm going to pass down to the Jewish people. That not everything is tolerable that the Goyim do to us. And we can create an army and move forward to protect ourselves, even if at the end of the day, we don't overtake Eretz Yisrael and we lose the war at the end. It doesn't make a difference. The battle itself is worthwhile. We need to know that we can fight the battle even if we can't win the war. The war will be won at the right time. And there'll be another Mashiach ben Yosef and another spark of Mashiach ben Yosef and another spark of Mashiach ben Yosef until finally the Mashiach ben Yosef does the final Makah B'Patish and we have the Geula Shalema. Rabi Akiva was this person. And Rabi Akiva, the Gemara tells us in the famous Gemara, he had 12,000 pairs of students. The Gemara doesn't say he had 24,000 students. The Gemara in Yevomis and Samach Beis Amud Beis uses an interesting lashon. It says Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students. We're not going to discuss that today. Just say 24,000. The Gemara doesn't say that. It says 12,000 pairs. And these 12,000 pairs of students died during Sfira. That's one of the reasons we have Lag Baomer, because either Lag Baomer or Lalat Al Baomer or the Ramah, Beis Yosef, they stopped dying from the plague, and the plague that we're witnessing should stop as well in its tracks in the course of the Tzaddik Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and the Baruch Shalom should give us Siyata D'Shmaya that should happen. After these 24,000 students died, the Gemara says that the Olam there was no Torah in the world. 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. So what did Rabbi Akiva do? The Gemara says Rabbi Akiva found 5 new students, and through them the Torah was reinvigorated. One of those 5 students was Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai ends up, his Petira is Lag Baomer. So 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died on Lag Baomer because they didn't respect each other properly. At least that's what the Gemara says, whatever that means. The plague stopped. And then years later, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, he's nifter on Lag Baomer as well. Rabbi Akiva left behind a perspective for us. It's a perspective where passivity is unacceptable. It's just an unacceptable hashkafa. It doesn't mean we have to go into the streets with guns, doesn't mean we have to go into the streets and fight, but it means at least mentally, our attitude should not be one of passivity. It should be one of moving forward. It should not be one of moving backwards. We're always moving forward and pushing forward to bring the Geula however way we can bring it in our little corners, whether it's learning the Das Tabunas and learning about the Gili Hayichud and teaching others about the Gili Hayichud, whether it's taking concrete actions that can help the Geula, whether it's making Aliyah, which helps the Geula. Whatever it is, it means not being passive about the concept of Geula, doing something. And that's what Rabi Akiva taught us and taught his Talmidim. I want to say the following. Everyone dances on Lag Baomer. There's a famous joke. I don't remember exactly how the joke goes. It's a person comes to a simcha, and someone comes over to him. Reuven comes to a simcha. He enters the catering hall, and Shimon comes over to Reuven and says, Reuven, are you here from the Kala side or are you here from the Chassid side? And Reuven says, oh, I must have the wrong place. I was supposed to be at a bar mitzvah. There's some long joke like that. Asachmo, a lot of times, mention tanzen and zevesa nishvavosa tanzen. There are a lot of times people dance, but they don't know what they're dancing for. You're walking in the street, you see good music, you see people are dancing, they're happy. What's the natural instinct? You start dancing. You join in, you dance. Everybody's having a good time, you dance. Sometimes you'll go over and say, what are people dancing about? But for the moment, it looks so nice, people are dancing, music, just join in and dance. Everybody likes to listen to music and dance on Lag Baomer. What are you dancing about? I'll say we're dancing because Rav Shimon Bar Yochai gave us the Zohar. And so much focus is on Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, and deservingly so. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai's story begins with the 24,000 students who died during Sfira, and Rabi Akiva, who had to start Torah again, and one of the 5 students was Shimon Bar Yochai. And many people have a minhag that instead of going to Meron, they go to Tveria on Lag Baomer, because that's where Rabi Akiva is buried, and that's where the Ramchal is buried. And some people go to Meron and Tveria. The story of Shimon Bar Yochai begins with Rabi Akiva. And Rabi Akiva's story needs to be understood in the context of the great, unbelievable Tana he was. You couldn't keep up with him. The depth of his knowledge was so great, you couldn't keep up with him. His analysis was so deep, you couldn't keep up with him. The halach is like him everywhere. But he left the Beis Medrash. And he was the motivating backbone between a revolt against the Romans. That doesn't sound like somebody we were talking about today, walking out of the Beis Medrash and talking about Eretz Yisrael, Medina Yisrael. Doesn't sound like that today. But Rabi Akiva was such a person. And the Ramchal is buried next to Rabi Akiva because Ramchal died in Akko in a plague, unfortunately, with his family. Ramchal's yard site is coming up on the 26th day of Iyar, next week. And a lot of people go to Tveria for Ramchal's yard site, 26th Iyar. The Gedolim at that time in Akko decided not to bury the Ramchal in Tveria, but to bury him next to not to bury the Ramchal in Akko, but to take him to Tveria and bury him in Tveria next to Rabi Akiva, because the Ramchal was also, they felt, was a nitzutz of Mashiach ben Yosef. He followed in the footsteps of Rabi Akiva. After all, the Ramchal wrote so much about Mashiach ben Yosef, they buried him next to Rabi Akiva, who we're told was a nitzutz of Mashiach ben Yosef. And like the Ramchal had a lot of problems in his time. They banned his Sforim, they buried his Sforim, they wanted to burn his Sforim. We didn't have a simple life, the Ramchal. He died very young. They chased him out of Padova in Italy. He went to Amsterdam. From Amsterdam, later in his life, he came to Akko and he spent 3 years in Akko before he died in the plague. He was a Nirdav. He was chased by great men of his time. There were Gedolim in his time that wanted to ban him, ban his Svarim, ban his teachings. They buried his Svarim. They put his Svarim in Cherem. This is historical fact. We're not talking about simpletons. We're talking about Gedolei Hador of that time oppressed Ramchal. Today, everybody wants to learn Ramchal. It wasn't that way. It took a long time for the Ramchal to regain his reputation that was so smeared. And we can see how it's smeared because we have letters that we have printed today in Svarim that were written by Gedolim of the Ramchal's time, who literally, in the scathing attacks on the Ramchal, they said awful things about him. They insinuated that he was a member of the Chas V'Shalom Shabtai Tzvi people. They insinuated the worst things. They insulted him in the worst ways, but the Ramchal persevered, and he wrote, and he left for us a treasure trove of understanding of the world. In other words, the Ramchal, like Rabi Akiva before him, is a persona who pushed forward with what his neshama told him to do, irrespective of what the world around him said for him, said about him, said with him. He pushed forward, and he left for us this treasure trove. Mashiach ben Yosef is not a passive person. He pushes forward the Geula. He writes a Das Tavunos to tell us about the Gilui HaYichud and how we can bring the Geula. He writes a Maimer HaGeula to explain to us Mashiach ben Yosef. This is his contribution to bringing the Geula, to teach us how we can bring the Geula. And he left that over for us many, many years ago, almost 300 years. Rabi Akiva left us also with this perspective. And Rabbi Shimon also left us with the perspective. And so when we dance on Lag BaOmer, we need to know the music we're dancing to and the reason we're so happy in dancing. Beyond everything else, the story begins with Rabi Akiva. And it begins with a concept of Mashiach ben Yosef. And so today is a day where we can reflect upon Rabi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon. And what was Rabi Akiva? He was a Tana of great magnitude, but he was also a warrior. He came out and wanted to fight the Romans. He wasn't going to sit passively back and watch Jewish suffering. He wanted to push the Geula forward. And that's something to dance about. Today we have a Masorah through Rabbi Shimon back to Rabi Akiva, that Judaism and the Geula are something that we need to work on. And how much did Rabbi Shimon write in the Zohar HaKadosh about Geula? And how much did he explain to us in the Zohar about the Geula? And these were great men who were trying to push forth the Geula and not sit passively back and wait for it. And Rav Kook, Zechron Tzaddik Livracha, we're not going to go into the politics that surrounded this, but in 1904, when Theodore Herzl died suddenly, there was a great debate internally about whether Rav Kook should end up at that funeral and whether he should speak at Herzl's funeral. A lot has been written about this. Rav Kook decided to attend the funeral and speak at the funeral, but he never mentioned Herzl. It's a very famous eulogy. It's published. They call it the non-eulogy eulogy. He doesn't speak about Herzl in his eulogy at all. The whole eulogy is about explaining what Mashiach ben Yosef is. That's what Rav Kook spoke about that day. He spoke about explaining to the Jewish people the place that Mashiach ben Yosef has in the life of the Jewish people, how important the concept of Mashiach ben Yosef is, how important it is to do things to push forward the Geula. And whether he was hinting at some way that Herzl, the assimilated Jew that he was, took a push forward took a push forward towards Medinas Yisrael, towards Geulas Yisrael. Whether that was his intention or not, much has been written about that. But that's what Rav Kook spoke about on that day, about Mashiach ben Yosef. This is an important concept for us to understand. Mashiach ben Yosef heals the Jewish people physically. He gives us a physical place to live, a physical place to be secure, a physical place to be safe after all the years in Golus, after all the years of oppression. Mashiach ben Yosef is going to give us a secure place, a place where we can live physically without being constantly tormented by the nations in the midst of whom we dwell. And then Mashiach ben David can come and lift us up spiritually. And in Rav Kook's thought, this is exactly what Medinas Yisrael is, the establishment of Medinas Yisrael, which he didn't live to see, but he saw. He didn't see it, but he saw it in the future. The establishment of Medinas Yisrael is a Mashiach ben Yosef kind of event. It's the establishment of a place that would give the Jewish people after the Holocaust, would give them a secure place, a safe place, a place where they can start building Torah. And that physical aspect of the Geula, you need a physical aspect. When we're not going back to the days where we need to study Torah in a basement in the Soviet Union upon penalty of somebody knocking on the door and taking you to Siberia for learning Torah in a basement. We're not going back to those days. We're not going back to those days, Baruch Hashem. And we now have in Eretz Yisrael the physical security. Of course, we have enemies around us, but Baruch Hashem, 72 years, Nes Min Hashemayim, we have persevered. And in this place, this physical place, which has given us jobs and a parnasa and a place to live and security and safety and a wonderful army and police, etc., with all the problems that are there, which we know there would be problems the Ramchal talks about. The Ramchal talks about the problems, the spiritual problems that will occur during the period of Mashiach ben Yosef. He talks about this. During the period of Mashiach ben Yosef, before Mashiach ben David, there'll be severe spiritual problems. So what we see outside, if you learn Ramchal, it's not like, oh, how did this happen? We knew it was going to happen. The Mishnah at the end of Sota tells us of things that will happen before Mashiach comes, of the lack of morals, the lack of ethics that will bring in and usher in Mashiach ben David. These are not like, oh my God, who would have ever thought of this? They were thought of, they were prophesied by, they were written by. And the Ramchal talks about the severe spiritual problems that will occur during this phase called Mashiach ben Yosef, or which he calls Pekida. There's no surprise here. But Baruch Hashem, we have Medinas Yisrael, and we have the land. And now we're in the process of finishing off the work of Mashiach ben Yosef, and we're waiting for Mashiach ben Yosef to finish the physical security, safety, and economy that we need here. And we need to daven in our tefillas that the Rebbeinu Shalom protect him and allow him to live and not be killed in that war of Gog and Magog. And when we have the full physical, economic security as a government needs, Mashiach ben David will come and he'll be ready to lift us up spiritually in a way that we don't even understand today. With all the Torah we're learning, we're going to be lifted up in a way that we never understood through Mashiach ben David. And that was the vision of Rabi Akiva. That is the vision of Chazal, that there's a Mashiach ben Yosef and a Mashiach ben David. And that's the vision of the Ramchal, and it's the vision of the Vilna Goyen. And today, if we're dancing, part of the dancing is for Rabbi Shimon and for the Zohar and for understanding the Torah to the depths of the Zohar. But it's also, the story begins with a Rabi Akiva who taught us not to be passive about Geula and not to be passive about Gentile tormenting us. Jewish people have a Messiah from the great Rabi Akiva, and Rabi Akiva did not make a mistake. He did what he needed to do, but he wasn't the man to complete the mission. That takes many generations. All those Jews that need Yeshua should have Yeshuas. All the Jews that need refuahs, the plague should stop today, legamri. And all the Jews that need refuah should have refuahs. All the Jews that need nechamas should have nechamas. And we celebrate today like Baomer, Rabbi Shimon, Rabi Akiva. Work on das tavunos. Work on thinking about these things. What can I do in my own life? Can I talk to someone about making aliyah? Can I help someone make aliyah? There are people who want to make aliyah, they just need some encouragement, words. There are people that you talk to, they say, I'm not sure, should I, maybe. Don't tell them, there are a lot of problems. I want to tell you, you just be ready for aliyah. I just want to tell you what the problems are. Encourage them. Every person that comes here is another brick in the Bias Mashiach. You have something you can learn. Das Tavuna, something, Geula. Learn these things. Talk to people about these things. These are things that we can do to push forward and bring the Geula b'mheir v'yameinu. And that's one of the things we can sing and dance about today. We have a Messiah from Rabi Akiva, that we don't have to wait for a man on a donkey. We can actually go out and learn and go out and do. And we should be zeicha to be as Mashiach b'mheir v'yameinu, and Mashiach ben Yosef should be safe and well. L'neitzach netzachim. Everybody have a wonderful Lag Baomer and a wonderful day.